Good morning, everyone, or good afternoon, depending on where you're at. I'm Kelli Diemer, and I'm with ACTE, Work-Based Learning. I welcome everyone to our webinar today, titled Delivering Real-World Experiences. So we're very excited with a great panel of three that are going to share some information with you in just a minute. So as we're gathering, hello, everyone. I'm going to go ahead and share my slide. So once again, welcome to Delivering Real World Experiences. My name is Kelli Diemer. I'm with ACTE, Work-Based Learning, and I'm very excited to have you meet our three panelists today. Some information about our student career development series I'd like to share with you. First off, we'd like to thank Zello, who is the sponsor of our webinar and the entire student career development series, which includes publications, webinars, and lessons on the 5 themes you see on the slide. So we have included a direct link you can see up above to a web page that houses all of this information. And again, I want to thank you, Zello. You have been a very valid partner in supporting this work. So today we're going to take a look at the webinar is based on a Delivering Real World Experiences publication. And it was recently written with ACTE, and it'll focus on establishing a sustainable and effective work-based learning experiences. Successful real-world experiences should include several key components, which will be outlined in the webinar to ensure a positive opportunity for our students and employers. In today's fast-paced society, it is imperative students are provided successful work-based learning opportunities. So we look forward to this webinar to learn about the nuts and bolts of successful work-based learning opportunities. I'd like to now run a poll of our participants today and have a few questions come. So Brandy, could you do our poll for us? First off, asking the participants, do you currently have a work-based learning program at your school? Please answer the question. Brandy, is it running as it needs to?
Yeah, we have a few that haven't answered yet, so I'll give it like 10 more seconds and I can display it.
Great, thank you. Okay, please answer the poll. Thank you. And it looks like most of our participants today do in fact have a work-based learning program at the school, 81% as opposed to 19%. Okay, do we have another question on our poll? Has COVID affected your work-based learning program? Please answer that question. Waiting for a few more participants. Thank you. And as to be expected, most people have said yes, COVID has affected their work-based learning program, 89% as compared to 11%. I wish I could say that was surprising, but it probably is not, seeing as work-based learning is all about engagement with employers. So thank you for that. We have a better concept of who's on our webinar today. So with that, I'd like to introduce our presenters. I'm serving today as your moderator, Kelli Diemer, and our panelists that will be sharing their information today. First off, Mike Hassler, he's from Washington County School District, and he is the coordinator. Mike and his team provide career services to 9 high schools, 4 middle schools, and 4 intermediate schools. When it comes to work-based learning, Mike's specialties include setting up industry connections, marketing and recruiting data management, job placements and career counseling. He's started with just 10 employer partnerships, and Mike has successfully developed over 390 new work-based learning industry sites, offering nearly 1,000 internships across 72 different career pathways to students enrolled into career and technical education since 2016. Results, 96% are work ready success rate and 12% growth per year, and was awarded the best in Utah. So Mike currently resides in St. George, Utah with his wife and 4 children. Our next panelist will be Jeff Delong. Jeff is the work-based learning coordinator for Fresno Unified School District in Central Valley of California. He's been with Fresno Unified since 2014 and is the first work-based learning coordinator for the district. Since transitioning to that role in 2015, he's developed and supported the district's work-based learning resources and implementation strategy, which has seen the growth of work-based learning experiences growing from 16,000 in the 2015-2016 school year to 67,500 in the 2019-2020 school year. Our third panelist today is Tanya Alcaret, and as an educator in I should have asked.
It's Pooter.
Thank you, school district. I'm so sorry. For the past 21 years, Tanya says her greatest accomplishment has been the relationships cultivated with students, parents, colleagues, and business partners. Throughout her career, she's been a business educator, a DECA advisor, work-based learning coordinator, and current technical education coordinator. She's passionate about innovating curriculum and systems to provide students with opportunities that connect learning in the classroom and interest to their future. I think we're in pretty good hands with our panelists today, and I appreciate everyone's time coming and participating. So with that, we're going to start with Mike. Mike Kassler?
Yeah, just a quick introduction. Yeah, so Mike Kassler, I guess you kind of heard a little bit about me with that introduction. Just excited to be here, to be honest with you. A big focus of our program, kind of what makes it successful, is just listening to the employer's voice. And from there, we've kind of adopted a couple policies. We have a tier system that we use to help students identify where they belong, to kind of help manage their expectations. But we also use the same tier system with our employers as well. And so it lets them understand where they're going to enter the program. Whenever an employer says no to a work-based learning experience or an internship, it's usually because of their perception of what that looks like. And so as we sit down and we kind of walk through this process, we're able to identify where the employer's levels, like where their comfort level is. And from there, we just kind of go to work. I think ever since we started using the tier system, I don't think we've ever had an employer say no since we started using it. It's been fantastic. We've made a pivot towards using LinkedIn as well this year, which has been huge for us. And we'll talk about that later. But every single one of our students now are using LinkedIn to connect with industry, networking, and building not only their personal portfolio, but also our program's portfolio as well. And so the use of the tier system and LinkedIn has been huge for our success. And so that's a little bit about what we do. Kelly, your mic's off.
Oh, yes. Jeff Delong?
Awesome. Good morning, everyone. I'm Jeff, or depending on where you are, it's about 10 here in California. I am Jeff Delong. I am the work-based learning coordinator for Fresno Unified here in the Central Valley of California. We are the 3rd largest school district in California at a little over 74,000 students. We started our CTE pathways back in 14-15 and started with just one pathway each school site to then be able to roll them out and then slowly be able to then added more pathways, each continuing year for about 3 years and added different grade levels. So we've grown from 10 pathways to just over 26 pathways. And we also have 6 California partnership academies, which are kind of like pathways as well. And with that growth came, the need for work-based learning knowledge and experience. Obviously, work-based learning is so huge with CTE. And so I started as a CTE coordinator at McLean High School, overseeing the pathways there, and then transitioned into work-based learning when they created the role, when they saw the need for work-based learning and the importance of it, and the emphasis that the state's putting on it even now. And so we were able to grow, like Kelly mentioned, grow our work-based learning from 16,000 back in 15-16 to just over 67,000, and that's actually with the pandemic happening, just over halfway through the year. So the growth in work-based learning has been huge. We see the value in it, and everyone on this call, I'm sure, sees the value as well. So glad to be here.
Great, thank you very much, Jeff and Mike, for your summaries of your programs. I now move on to our third panelist, Tanya.
Hello, everyone. Thanks for having me. Like Kelly said, I've been a work-based learning coordinator in Poudre School District for almost 20 years. And I've recently transitioned to the district level as the Career and Technical Education Coordinator. I've seen lots of change and the pendulum swing in the last 20 years. When I started in 2001, lots of emphasis on work-based learning, lots of students engaging. And then over the years, with budget cuts and the emphasis on college readiness, we saw those programs dwindle in Poudre School District. We serve approximately 29,000 students in Fort Collins, Colorado. And over the last 4 years, we've been seeing that pendulum swing back, which has been very exciting. So the state of Colorado has adopted work-based learning as our new Perkins metric for quality CTE programming. So we're in the middle of making a pivot and really looking to expand and grow our programs to meet the needs of our career and technical education students, and also to align with our state requirement for career and college readiness. In the state of Colorado, it's called an ICAP, an Individual Career and Academic Plan. So we're looking at how can we overlay work-based learning, career and technical education, and career and academic planning to have those three components all work together. In the chat, I just put a link to our website. A lot of this work is new. I'm not near where my counterparts are today with engagement and metrics. However, in 17-18, we engaged 1,000 students in work-based learning, and in 17-18, and then in 18-19, we engaged 2,075, which was over 100% increase. In 19-20, 3,200 students. And I'll be honest, this year due to COVID, that number's gone way down. We're trying to track and align our engagement in work-based learning to align with the continuum. So how many activities are we providing students to explore versus how many are in the prep column, so the internships and apprenticeships. So yeah, we have a lot of work to do. It's a little bit of history where we're at, and excited, really excited about where we're headed.
Thank you, Tanya. Thank you, Mike, Jeff, and Tanya, for your overviews of your programs. I think with the Perkins and this being a potential quality indicator for our states, it is very exciting that work-based learning has gone from not being anything popular at all to being so very popular that it is a measurement of a quality CTE program. So that is very exciting. Having said that, though, we're going to hear more about how it's about a quality program, not a quantity of programs or quantity of experiences. And while we're anxious to hear how we can grow our programs, we always need to keep in mind growing them for quality. And so excited for those types of inputs. So we're going to move on to some of the questions now that we have prepared for our panelists. So I would yeah, we'll just go ahead and get started. So I'm going to start with Jeff, since I'm going to ask Jeff, what were the biggest challenges in implementing your work-based learning program when you started?
So as I mentioned, being the third largest district in the state, we have a lot of students to serve, which also means we have a lot of teachers. And so the biggest thing that we found with work-based learning is we really needed to build capacity in teachers in finding ways to actually incorporate work-based learning in their planning. Not only that, we have a CTE coordinator at every high school that oversees the pathways there. And so building capacity in them as well, to not just see the value in work-based learning, but to really find ways to get those students exposed and get those students those experiences that really tie in the classroom learning to the world of work, which is obviously the essential component of work-based learning and the importance of it. And so once we did that, and that took a lot of research. I was going up and down the state doing site visits. Obviously, that's going to be a little different now with COVID. Going to a lot of conferences and just trying to figure out what other districts are doing. There are a lot of districts here in California that do work-based learning very well, especially down in Porterville, Long Beach as well. And so finding out what they do, and then figuring out what would work for our district, obviously, because what works for one district might not necessarily work for the other one, or any of the districts. So just finding those components of what we can do here, starting slow, and really trying to, again, build capacity in teachers to find those experiences and how they can embed it, and really having them work on work-based learning plans that we can be modified each year to where they are deliberate in what they want to do and what experience they want to have students do, that will then make that unit or that project authentic, and add relevance to it. So the capacity building in teachers and coordinators was huge.
Thank you, Jeff. Yeah, it's a good concept to remember, that when we're talking about work-based learning, we're talking about the whole continuum of them. So it's not just the work-based learning coordinator and the internship, it's all those building activities up to that to help students be well informed. Would anyone else like to chime in on question 1, or else we'll move to question 2?
I think a big, I guess, challenge that we had when initially starting the work-based learning program a few years back is how to utilize everybody, the teachers, the counselors and stuff like that. And I think that's where a lot of programs, they become so dependent on the counseling centers to offer referrals and recruiting. And so you look at that model, and it works as long as the counselors are talking and they're working. But as soon as they decide that they're busy or something happens, then you notice that recruiting and work-based learning efforts reduce. And so in our situation, a few years ago, we actually had 7 part-time work-based learning counselors at the schools. Then we had myself and a few other people. And so we had, I think there was 11 people total working on the program. And we realized, just from experience of, how do we do this? We learned that actually reducing it, we can get more done. And so now we have room for 4 full-time people, and that's it. And we have 4 people working 9 high schools plus the intermediates and the middle schools. And so a big thing for us is how to utilize the talent that you have, and how do you take things off the plates and move some things around. But we went from 11 down to 4, and we're able to get more done. It's been crazy.
So Michael, you're saying adding more to someone's plate doesn't necessarily mean it's successful? Is this what you're saying?
I mean, I'm sure it can work in some areas. It didn't work in ours. And then we're currently working on, like I say, recruiting, where anything the counseling centers give us is just icing on the cake. We feel like if we can take that off of their plates, then they're more willing to help us out. And we've been seeing the improvements, and we love kind of the direction that we're going with that.
Okay, well, great, thank you. Mike, I'm going to just keep your microphone on here and ask you question 2. What are the biggest challenges your work-based learning program faces through the pandemic? Excuse me.
Yeah, so semester 1, we actually only lost 20 internships because of the pandemic. So I was feeling pretty good about that. And so I thought we were kind of in the clear. And then this next semester, we actually lost 115 spots in health science. And so you would think, wow, they really gouged you, and it really hurt you. And I've been trying to kind of figure out how to boil it down and what is the biggest issue. And I honestly feel like the biggest thing that it's created in terms of an issue for us is fatigue. And so when people are fatigued, they obviously they look to take things off their plate. And so in our situation, we had to then look at this and say, well, if you're fatigued, then how can we put you on, kind of like they do in baseball? They put the pitchers on a pitch count. How do we keep your arm fresh? And so what we've ended up doing is then just adding more to the plate. So I know when we got started today, we had 390 is what you had announced, partners. And then we've gone from 390 to 470 since the pandemic. So it's just, what it's done is it's required us to go out there and get more employers, which then that's another issue is the gatekeepers, right? So normally you walk in there and you get talking with the employers and you can kind of make things work. In our situation, we couldn't go into the employers anymore. And so we got lucky. And at the exact time that this pandemic hit, our state was looking to kind of pivot, and they actually allowed us to start using LinkedIn. And so it's the greatest thing about LinkedIn is when you message an employer on LinkedIn, you have a 50% chance of them opening it. And so we got a 50% chance. And so what we've started using is we use LinkedIn to connect with the industry. They can see our portfolio, they kind of see some of our successes. And then once we message the employers through LinkedIn, we've been able to increase our capacity since then. And so we kind of have overcome this issue with fatigue by adding more employers. And then of course, the ones that we lost, yeah, that was frustrating, but I understand. But in the end, LinkedIn was kind of a lifesaver for us. I think without it, we probably would be on life support at this point. And so we're just super happy that it all lined up at the same time.
Well, good to hear. I know I've either heard of like the health positions either go way up because of COVID, because they just need more help, or go way down depending on where they're at. So yes, COVID most certainly has, the pandemic certainly has had a footprint in this. With Tanya or Jeff, would you like to chime in on this question?
Yeah, similar to Mike, we obviously got a huge hit in our internships. When COVID hit, everything kind of stopped, and we had a lot of students in health facilities that, or even nursing homes that weren't able to be obviously in those facilities. And so just much like I'm sure other districts, a lot of it was just trying to find resources for teachers, because they're then having to, they were trying to find ways to get kids engaged online, to keep their cameras on. We knew work-based learning was a way to do that, but how? And how do we still have these experiences for students? How do we still stay with our work-based learning plan, even though that we're doing a distance learning? So working with, we have a business engagement coordinator, Terry Kaiforce, and she does a great job with building our partnerships. As Mike mentioned, partnerships are huge. We have over 750, and they were instrumental in providing virtual experiences for our students. And now we're moving into the offering virtual internships for students who can still have those experiences, still take those skills they're learning and apply them, but in a safe and a virtual format. So we're definitely trying to overcome those challenges, but they're similar to what Mike was mentioning.
And I would add a lot of similar challenges. We've had some of our sectors and industries be real creative, though. The ACE Mentor Program is a national program for architecture, construction, and engineering. And all of our mentors in that program, where our students are in a virtual type internship, think that this model may work better for students moving forward. So lots of challenges, but also some opportunities in the future to connect. We've connected more students to career panels than we have in the past. So yeah.
I would agree, Tanya. There's obviously pros and cons with distance learning, but the opportunities, like we found so many ways to engage with industry virtually. And we've even done like virtual tours where I will go out, or Terry myself will go out and film a tour as if students are actually going on it, that we can then create a video and house it internally, and that video stays forever. And so we're able to really create these resources that we can keep going forward. So we've already decided, even once things start opening back up, we're going to continue to do these, because those experiences are valuable for students, and they can then have Q&A with those partners afterwards. So partner having to do the same tour 15 times, they can do it once and then have a Q&A afterwards. And so it's really help force us to be creative on how we offer experiences, but then creating so many opportunities where we can even have experiences with multiple schools, which we couldn't do. Guest speaker couldn't talk to more than one class. Now we can have 5 classes on a call and they can speak to more students. So it's definitely opened up those opportunities.
Great. Thank you for sharing all that good information. I'm going to move on to question 3. And I'm going to throw this at Jeff. Jeff, what were some of the advantages your students receive in their education from their work-based learning experiences?
So as I mentioned, Tara Kiteforce, our business engagement coordinator, does a great job in getting champion partners, and they engage with our students in so many different ways. And obviously, the emphasis of work-based learning is that industry engagement, and they are champions. They see the benefit of it. Whenever time there's a need, they are invested, and they really push our students. They push our students in a lot of ways to think about, the concepts they're learning in the classroom, how it relates to the real world, showing them a variety of different engaging in a variety of different ways, and really being personable. They evaluate student projects. We really focus on having the industry partners be the evaluation person to give feedback rather than the students just presenting to their classmate and their teacher. Because when they know they're presenting to someone who is an expert in that field or specialist, the quality of work drastically increases. And they learn how to give and receive feedback and how to apply it. Sometimes students get negative feedback and they kind of put their head down and quit. Showing them that in the real world, we all have to get feedback. We all get evaluations at some point. And so how do you take that feedback and apply it to what you're doing? We do mock interviews in almost all of our pathways, so students really get that experience of interviewing, but also engaging with an adult, and really understanding how to carry themselves, how to work on their communication, how to make sure they have a quality resume, a quality email address. And so overall, our industry partners and our teachers who have bought in really place a lot of value in that. So students leave these pathways with the experience of learning how to communicate, learning how to engage with industry, and really because we do so many things in terms of tours and job shadows, that they really understand what the world of work looks like before they graduate.
Okay. Thank you, Jeff. Just so everyone knows, I'm trying to jot down some of the questions that are coming across the chat. Thank you very much. And some people are giving comments to everyone. Perfect. As we get through our questions, I'll try to incorporate your questions as needed, or else we will do our very best to cover all the questions that you had in the chat. So continue with that. Anyone else want to share on that? Otherwise, we'll move on to the next question. Question 4, Tanya, it's your turn. Tanya, how have you found industry partners in your community to align work-based learning opportunities?
Great, thanks. Yeah, so we are again in the middle of I would really say our pivot. We were making our pivot, we were doing a good job, and then COVID hit. And 2 or 3 years ago, when we were looking at realigning our work-based learning program from any student, any experience, a lot of the kids that were in our work-based learning courses were using it for credit recovery and to graduate from high school. So looking at pivoting from that to a aligned program, a set of CTE courses, and then ending with that continuum in mind of an experience that's 30 hours or longer for students in our CTE programs. We heard from our employers as we went through that redesign. We have in Northern Colorado, in Larimer County, we have 3 major comprehensive school districts. And our employers and our partners that engage with Poudre School District also want to engage with students in Thompson School District, Estes Park, Windsor. And so we heard this feedback of it's hard to figure out how to engage, and it's different with every high school, and you're only 5 miles apart within school districts. So we've really been working on a regional effort with our workforce center, our chamber, and our school districts in Larimer County and Northern Colorado. We just launched NOCO Inspire. I put it in the chat, and this is a work-based learning alliance run by our workforce center to bring all of our industry partners together, whether it's secondary, post-secondary, any public partner. This is a place where our partners can go to engage, and they can find out, how do I offer a work-based learning experience? So this has launched in the last 2 months. We're excited about where it's going. And that's one effort for recruiting and aligning and listening to our partners' needs. The second one is our ICAP tool. Most of you probably use Naviance for your students to engage in their career and academic planning. We made the change 3 years ago to go with Zello. One of the biggest reasons we decided to choose that platform is because they have a work-based learning component. So when a student goes in and they're completing their career research, their college applications, and they look at, hey, I'm interested in nursing, and I'm looking at a nursing career. This platform allows the student to see not only, what the pay is, what the college degrees are, but it shows the local employers that will offer work-based learning opportunities to the students. So the students can see in nursing, Columbine Health Center offering apprenticeships. They can see the career tours. And when they click make a request, they engage directly with the business partner. So that's been really helpful to our students. When our students come in as a site-based work-based learning coordinator, they would say, Miss Alcaret, I'm interested in a job shadow in engineering. And prior to this tool in our district, we didn't have a way to really manage our work-based learning requests and our partners. And so in the past, I would go back through my email, I would look, I would ask others, try to get that student connected. Now I can say, log into Zello, and the student can see by sector and industry all of the work-based learning opportunities available in Northern Colorado. And similarly then on the other end, when our employers would engage with us and they would say, hey, we want to engage with students in work-based learning, we would say, okay, great. And we were all individuals at our sites, right? And so then one coordinator would get this opportunity and maybe go try to find kids, but not sure how to do that. And we didn't have an action step for our employers. And now we do. And when we have employers that want to engage, or when we're recruiting, we now, they can register using Zello. And so all of our business partners, when they talk to anyone in Poudre School District and say, I would like to engage, we say, great, complete this registration form, please register here. And then that opportunity is made available to all students in Poudre School District. And new, beginning this year, Thompson School District has adopted, and so has Estes Park. So now all of our partners in Larimer County register one place, and they can engage with students in all of Larimer County, not just Poudre School District. So that's something that we're going to continue to explore and refine, and using that tool to engage with our business partners. And then the last piece is really our advisory committees. So in the past, using our CTE advisory committees hasn't been super intentional. So now we're going to combine our registered partners on Zello, ask them to be a part of our advisory committees. And our goal of all of our CTE advisory committees from here forward is developing work-based learning opportunities. That's the #1 goal and ask we have of our partners on our advisory committee. So that's where we're headed. We still have a lot of work to do. In our first year in using Zello pre-COVID, we had 110 business partners in Northern Colorado that registered. And we had over 300 work-based learning opportunities to offer. Hard to say this year where we're at, but we hope to see that continue to grow in the future. And so those are just a few things that we're doing to work towards engaging with our business partners and really listening to their needs and trying to meet their needs and what they're asking for.
That's terrific to have that tool that helps make those assist teachers and things making those connections. So anything to add, Jeff?
Yeah, similar to Tanya, we really relied on our advisory board, and that really started with the creation of the advisory board and really making sure that it's we have champions on there. And then what Tara did is we created subcommittees for different sectors. So that advisory board is made up of 6 subcommittees that cover all of the sectors in California, and that's really where the work, like Tanya mentioned, of being deliberate and finding work-based learning experiences happen, because teachers are there, industries there, and they really make that connection, and they can help with those experiences and say, what do you we have this experience being offered, or hey, I'm looking for someone to come in and talk to my students about this, and they really can start to engage, and that's where they get comfortable talking to industry. But we also, what we do is when industry partners, we're part of different chambers or part of different organizations in the Fresno area to get out and market our pathways. We're presenting at different organizations and intermediaries. But when we meet with partners, we really want to kind of meet them where they're at. As Tanya mentioned, kind of figuring out where they, how much do they want to get engaged? Do they know about our pathways? Do they know different ways? Usually it starts with guest speaking. That's usually the low-hanging fruit, or having them come to one of the subcommittees to really so they can see what it's like working with teachers and seeing students that are there, and oh, it's not that scary. And then it progresses, along, and they get more comfortable. And then that's really how we build our champions, is meeting them where they're at their capacity. And the same thing for all of our experiences. We never want to tell them this is what you need to do. It's what can you, how many students can you accommodate? How many hours? Can you come into the classroom and speak for a few hours? Can you take a few students on a job shadow? If so, how many? We never force their hand. It's they have a job too. They're trying to obviously, work in the real world. So what can they accommodate to where they can still see the value in it, give back? A lot of them sometimes are just trying to build their talent pipeline because they know that they're gonna have a job, a job shortage in the future. So how do I, try and build my workforce back up and get my, students might not even know this career. So really is meeting them where they're at and relying on them to progress as they go.
Thank you. Yes, it just can't be emphasized enough to use these business partners for the gamut of work-based learning opportunities, and bring them in to feel comfortable about working with students. Going to ask Jeff again, question number 5, what recommendations do you have for schools starting brand new work-based learning programs at their schools to help make them successful and sustainable?
I have a few, but the biggest one I think is just be patient. When we rolled out work-based learning and our pathways, like I mentioned, we did it over a period of about 3 or 4 years. And our work-based learning had to grow from that, as did the number of partners that we had. So it was a growth. We didn't just set a goal of we want 70,000. We really tried to, again, be patient with our growth, make sure that teachers weren't stressed out, make sure industry wasn't stressed out, do things small scale, and then build from that. And then that came from really assessing our school and our district. Every school site's different, even within our district. Every culture is different. The teachers are different. And so really figuring out what works for you, what worked for this pathway, what worked for even this teacher. Because work-based learning does generally occur in the classroom. And so just trying to find out where your gaps are, what do you see that you need to make it a successful program? And it really took a lot of, we did a lot of internal assessment of our programs and work-based learning, and where we fit and where we matched up, and compared to other districts, and looking at what a quality work-based learning program looks like. As was mentioned earlier, quantity is great, but we really focused on quality the last few years, and had to define what that looks like, because it's a very obviously objective term. And so how do we assess quality? How do we make sure that we can do things and not push partners away or have a bad experience for students or even teachers for that matter? And then lastly, it's just the quality of the experience, and that's what are students able to do because of that experience. And so we put a high emphasis on giving students resources and activities to do before the experience, and then things to do during the experience, whether it's a guest speaker note-taking tool, they're going on a tour, they have things to look for, and then what they can do after the experience. So is it a reflection? Is it a presentation? So the students are engaged throughout the process, because we found the more students are engaged in the experience, the more the employers are going to be engaged, because they really are going to see, wow, these students are really interested, and these students are asking good questions. And so it has to be both a quality experience for the student and the employer. And the more we focused on that, really we're able to sustain our programs and have champion partners that stick with us because of the experience that we provided them from them being involved.
Thank you, Jeff. Yes, thank you for emphasizing the whole quality, and it's for our students to get back what they're giving for the time. Most certainly for the business partners, the time invested that we're getting closer to the finish line for what the student needs for outcomes coming from that. I would just say when you're doing a work-based learning program and you're bringing partners in and trying to get champions, as was mentioned, it's about clear expectations for everybody. So the business supervisor, the on-site supervisor for that internship that's going to be working with that student, very clear expectations on what you need from them, what the student's going to need from them, what their involvement needs to be, but likewise with the whole company. So the company understands that this is not cheap labor. This is not, an extra set of hands. There is a most certainly a big value for the student and for the school, and likewise then potentially a future future employee for the company. Minimally, just really helping out the student, giving them additional information. Anyone else want to chime in for number 5? Otherwise, we'll move on. Mike?
Yeah, I think the biggest thing that we've learned is to not try and force it and bring along the ones that want to come. I think as we look around the room and we see the talent and we see who's engaged and who's not, I think we follow it. And I think this also answers a little bit of question 4 for us as well, but something that you guys could a little take home from today that you could practice today if you haven't already, but it's to reach out to your champion and ask them, who do they know? A quick example would be, I was looking to set up some extra dental opportunities, and I was just struggling to find the right dentist. And so I reached out to one of our good partners, and I said, hey, we love you guys. We think that you're fantastic, but the last thing we want to do is overburden you with another student. I mean, because it takes a lot to train a student. And I said, who do you recommend around here? And she goes, well, let me make a couple calls for you. And then within probably 3 to 5 minutes, she already had 2 employers lined up for me. And so that's when I learned the strength of, well, that's how we find partners is we go this route. I feel like when it comes to building a program and bringing people into it and then keeping them, I think that success breeds success. And I don't think if we're doing it right, we shouldn't have to ask for referrals, but people should want to come into the program. And so, but one thing that we like to do that we're starting to do a lot, like I said, is how do we recruit and how do we work with what we have? Well, we have some career coaches that the one, she loves to go out there and recruit, and the other one, not so much, but that doesn't mean that they're both not good. They're fantastic. But what we've learned is if we just turn to one of our students that loves the program and we say, which one of your teachers is your favorite teacher? And they say, oh, it's this person. Would you be willing to ask them to let us come in and do a presentation? And it's funny because whenever we go to the teachers, they always start telling us about how busy they are. But when teacher's pet comes in and says, hey, could these guys come do a presentation with me? As in the students there with us, they always say yes. And that's what I've learned when you're building a program is to find those little pockets and let that success kind of do the talking for you. The students will advocate for the program and the employers will too. I can reach out to businesses and I can reach out to teachers, but I much rather would have, someone else do it if I could, because, they're the ones that kind of have that, they've experienced it. And so that would just be something I'd say is to find utilize the talent in your room, play to their strengths, and then find new ways to use that same talent.
That's you delegate. That's the name of the game to survive our busy work schedules, is to find those champions that can spread the positive word. Moving on to question number 6, good question, because the whole title of the presentation today is delivering real world experiences. So why do you think that real world experiences are so imperative to all of our students' education? Throwing that at Mike.
As I got that, I think my response will change now. So I would have obviously gone with the whole in the past, the experience, and even if they find out they don't like it, that's a victory. And those are very true answers. But one thing I've learned from utilizing LinkedIn now is the power of networking. And so we are able to help place students across the state now, like when they go on to college, and we're able to place them in work and jobs, and we're able to help them kind of connect with people in advance. And when students go through at least our program, I think the power of networking is the most beneficial thing that we can give them. It's huge because the network kind of helps, teach them what it's like to get where you want to be. The other thing too is I'm always thinking about the introverted student, the one who's talented, or even the student who, but they don't like to speak for themselves, or maybe they're scared. And in our program as well, the LinkedIn aspect is becoming a portfolio and is becoming a voice for the introverted student. And so it's no longer just saying, well, if you come, you're only going to see the best and the brightest who can speak the best. But now we just let the students' talent speak for themselves. And I really do feel like utilizing the portfolio through work-based learning experiences and internship experiences gives a voice to everybody, an equal voice, and allows them to utilize their network with that voice. And I'll tell you, there's just, it's just been fun to watch. And so I think from my perspective, where I'm sitting with what we're doing, that would be the most beneficial, is networking and a voice for all students. I guess lastly is just image management, brand management, is helping them understand how to kind of build their brand. We've never built stuff on social media before. We've always lectured about, Instagram and stuff like that. But now that they're building a brand on LinkedIn, it's allowed us to help them all of a sudden start seeing how things correlate with their Instagram accounts and other things like that. And the students, I believe that their level of professionalism has increased because of it. And these are just 3, I think, side benefits that came from using LinkedIn the way that we do. But yeah, that's what I'd say is networking, I guess, a voice for the students, and then of course brand management. It's been fun to watch.
I would agree completely. A question that oftentimes comes up after you explain the value that your program has used with LinkedIn is the question of, privacy, student privacy, and that kind of thing. And I do know that your school has put together some special forms to allow students to put their stuff out there and get permission. So I don't know if we have time, but if you can put, I think you can maybe put the link in the, maybe in the chat, or mention it briefly, because yes, many school districts prohibit students from putting their, have that being an educational component to put their information out there. So, so want to say that. Tanya, do you have something to add to this?
Yeah, I've also been intrigued. I went to a presentation last year from Cajon Valley and the work they're doing around the world of work. I think it's outside of San Diego. But this whole kind of thought process about how are we tying work-based learning to social emotional learning with students, and the ability for students to see their future self, right? And starting at a younger age. And I really think when, it says imperative, it's imperative that a student can see their future and how they can be successful in the future, and to see that path. So I'm really excited and interested and hoping we can see more of that tie-in between our students' social emotional health, work-based learning, and their future self.
And I would add as well, I think Mike said it perfectly in terms of having things be real world and have things be relevant are so key. And obviously, work-based learning, I always say it's connecting the classroom learning to the world of work. And even when we have our experiences like tours or job shadows, regardless if a student wants to be in that industry or not, they might not know. But as he mentioned, they might get there and say, you know what, I don't like the smell of a hospital, or I don't like this, this is something I don't like. That's perfectly fine. But the other important piece is they get to see what a work environment looks like beyond the 4 walls of their classroom. Or, these days, whatever they're doing their schoolwork at home, how people interact, how they communicate, how they work together, how they dress. They don't have earbuds in their ears. They're not texting all day, what it looks like. So regardless of what industry it is, or the industry, they get to see kind of different work environments to see what when they graduate and they get a job somewhere, what they can expect. And we really focus on, when we work with industry, is when they're doing these experiences, whether it's a project or whether it's evaluations, is be as real world as possible, be as relevant as possible. Because we found when kids work on things, that are actually could be implemented. Like we work with the city of Fresno for land planning, and they say, we have a problem. How would you solve this? Kids are trying to really solve these real world problems. And that makes it authentic, and they really get more engaged in this hypothetical, in a perfect world, how would you, build this house? It's really authentic and relevant to what they're doing. So it's very, very important.
Thank you. Thank you all for your good answers. I do have one more planned question, but I want to throw out two things that were brought up in the chat box for everyone to think about. And we are about down to about 9 minutes, and I do have a couple things to say at the end, so keep that in mind. But two questions they came across on the chat was, how do you, when you have students that come into the program with either 504 plans or IEPs, how do you deal with that with working with an employer? And then the other question is, how do you recognize or celebrate those business partners for their time they've invested with your students? So keep that in mind. I'm going to go back to our last plan question. And Tanya, you are up for this one. What required classroom instruction is paired with your students' work-based learning opportunities?
Yeah, so like I said, we're really trying hard to align our ICAP, that's 6th through 12th grade in the state of Colorado, with work-based learning. So when we talk about work-based learning, it's the continuum. So we have classroom instruction and curriculum aligned at the 8th grade level. So at the 8th grade level, when students are engaging in the career coach discussion boards, or when they're looking at an informational interview, guest speakers, career tours, we're having all of that documented, and we have assignments that we have built in our ICAP tool, which I mentioned we just pivoted to Zello for that. And so then they can start documenting their ICAP and their work-based learning all in the same place. And then when they get into high school, we're also looking at overlaying work-based learning with our CTE courses. So we've sequenced our courses finally in the state of Colorado, level 1 through level 4 courses. And so in those level 1 exploration courses, you would expect there's mostly 9th and 10th graders. So we're asking all of our CTE teachers in those courses to set aside one lesson for guest speakers or career tours or research. And then our work-based learning coordinators that are in the buildings go in and they teach those lessons with those students. So those coordinators are getting connected at the level 1 level with our students within their pathways. And then at the level 2 and 3, that's where we want to dive in a little bit deeper. We want to get them out in a job shadow. So we're looking at in our level 2 and 3 courses, aligning a job shadow within those courses as an assignment. And then our level 4 course in every career and technical education pathway is a work-based learning course. So that counts as their 4th. And when a student completes 3 semester-long classes within their pathway, they are then eligible for that work-based learning course where we're going to work with our business partners and we get them connected to a healthcare opportunity or a computer science or whatever it is within their CTE program. Within that work-based learning course, then we have a little bit more of that structured curriculum. We use Google Classroom. Students are using Zello, Google Classroom, and they're also using LinkedIn. And then at the end, they have a culminating presentation that they give about their work-based learning experience. Some of them are paid, some of them are unpaid. Some of them, the students already have the experience, especially in like culinary arts. And some of them, they don't have an experience. So we have an internship coordinator at the district level who does the outreach to help get that student placed.
Thank you. Thank you. So you're saying it's not just the continuum of experiences, but it's all the teachers, it's the whole district, it's all grade levels, it's just age appropriate activities. And it's not a work-based learning one shot, it's a work-based learning program or experience that interacts with the students several times. Great message that you all are repeating that because yes, that's the one shot isn't going to answer all the questions for the students, but the multiple experiences are. So thank you for that. So I'm going to move into those bonus questions now from our people listening in. So thank you. So the IEP 504 plan, does anybody want to jump in on that? If you have a student that's got some special concerns, Mike?
Yeah, we have quite a few in our program that have that are high need or high functioning, autistic or whatever it may be. We don't waive any requirements for any student, but we provide accommodations along the way. And so I know that there's hardly any time left, but I would say the biggest trick I've learned when it comes to connecting them is of course having employers in that tier system, tiers 1 through 3. But asking the employers to do a working interview when you have a student who's got some disabilities. As soon as when the students go in there to do a working interview where they're actually going through, they're walking through the business and they're having the interview as they're going, the students have just killed it in such a good way. But it wasn't until we switched to working interviews for those students that we're able just to start placing them. And so that has been a huge thing is working interviews. And that's kind of what we do with the employers, and it's been great.
Yeah, sounds like a good solution for not breaking any student privacy and allowing them to advocate for themselves.
Yeah, because we can't say those things, and so all I ever say is this students, you're going to love them, but they get nervous, and the traditional interview doesn't work for them. But if you'd be willing to do a working interview, that would be fantastic. And every time they've said yes, the student shows up, and then they've been taken on.
So, okay. We're going to need to wrap this up because we're going to run out of time and our webinar is going to shut off. So I apologize if we didn't get to all questions. We had such good answers with our panelists that I just didn't have the heart to mute them. So thank you all for sharing your great information. I'm going to go back to giving you, sharing my screen and giving you all the contact information so you can see more about these great people that we saw today. Slide. There you go. So there's the contact information for everybody. Mike Hassler from Utah. Thank you, Mike, very much for sharing your information. And he did put the information about LinkedIn, the permission form in the chat. Jeff Delong for showing us how growing a program in California can be so successful. Thank you for that. And Tanya Alcaret for your connection with Zello and how you're able to connect students and work through that program and why that was such a necessary component with what you're doing. So I just want to thank everybody for their time. I want to thank Zello for their support of this webinar. And as I put in the chat box, please consider coming to the ACTE Iowa Work-Based Learning Conference or attending it virtually. We are still, we're anxiously looking at the registrations that are coming in. So please visit the website and to learn more about it. Anything else? Okay. All right. Well, thank you all again for your time today, and have a great day and stay warm.
Hey, thank you, Kelly.
Thanks, Kelly. Appreciate it. Bye, Mike. Bye, Tanya.
See everyone.
Bye, thank you.